Something has changed in the Chinese car market this summer. We are no longer talking about one crazy EV arriving every few months and shocking everybody with a big battery or a giant screen. Instead, completely new cars are appearing almost every week, and each one seems to attack a different part of the automotive industry. One wants to replace the luxury SUV. Another is putting four LiDAR sensors on a production vehicle. Another can make almost 800 horsepower while looking like a family SUV. Another starts below $15,000. And then you have a pickup with more than 900 horsepower and a claimed 1,300 kilometers of total range. These aren't distant concepts waiting for some future decade. Several of these cars have launched or opened pre-orders within the last few weeks, right here in 2026. So forget the usual futuristic car countdown for a moment. This time we're looking at 6 brand new Chinese cars that are changing the rules of what a modern car is supposed to be. Number 6, Stelato G9. The Stelato G9 might be the easiest car on this list to underestimate. From a distance, it is simply a very large, very expensive SUV. But then you start looking underneath the body, and suddenly the thing becomes much harder to explain. Stelato is the joint venture between Huawei and BAIC, and the G9 is the first genuine off-road SUV developed under Huawei's Harmony Intelligent Mobility Alliance. It opened pre-sales on August 5th and is officially launching on August 20th with a starting pre-sale price of around 439,800 yuan, or roughly $65,000. Within the first 72 hours, Stelato said it had already collected more than 15,000 pre-orders. That is serious money for a Chinese SUV, so the car needs something serious to justify it, and it has plenty. Every version gets dual-motor all-wheel drive, Huawei's latest ADS-5 assisted driving system, an L3-ready architecture, dual-chamber air suspension, continuously variable dampers, and rear-wheel steering that can turn the rear wheels by up to 12 degrees. That last number sounds small until you realize how useful it is on a vehicle measuring more than 5.2 meters long. A giant SUV can use rear steering to rotate into tight spaces that would make a conventional vehicle feel like a bus. Then there's the off-road equipment. The G9 can raise its ground clearance, has an adaptive mechanical differential lock on the rear axle, and can wade through water up to around 900 millimeters. The battery electric version uses a 120 kilowatt-hour ternary lithium battery and claims up to 728 kilometers CLTC range, while the range extended version combines a 75.4 kilowatt-hour battery with a 1.5-liter turbocharged range extender and claims more than 1,366 kilometers of combined CLTC range. So you have a vehicle that can take the family on a 1,000-kilometer journey, drive electrically around town, steer its rear wheels, raise itself for rough terrain, and simultaneously run one of Huawei's most advanced driver assistance systems. And this is where it gets interesting. Huawei is no longer just supplying a screen or an infotainment system to car companies. It is effectively supplying a technological nervous system. The G9 is a perfect example of what happens when the software company, electronics company, and automaker start working as one product development team. And the timing makes this even more interesting because the G9 officially launches on the exact day before the Chengdu Auto Show opens. In other words, while everyone is preparing to look at what Chinese automakers are showing next, this thing is already moving into the market. Number 5, Luxeed RX. And now we move from an off-road monster to something that looks like it escaped from the premium crossover segment. The Luxeed RX is the newest SUV from Luxeed, the EV brand created by Huawei and Chery. But this time, Huawei and Chery are trying something different. Instead of giving it another letter and number combination, like the S7 or R7, they simply called it RX. More importantly, this is Huawei's first HiMa SUV to use a 4 LiDAR setup. The car is opening for orders on August 20th, the same major HEMA event where the Stelato G9 is being launched. And that timing is interesting because these two vehicles couldn't be more different in personality. The G9 is trying to prove that a luxury SUV can go anywhere. The RX is trying to prove that a premium road-focused crossover can see almost everything around it. The RX measures around 5.02 meters long, with a 3-meter wheelbase, and it used either a single 277 kilowatt motor or a dual motor setup, combining 160 and 277 kilowatts. But the big story isn't really horsepower, it is the sensor architecture. The RX is equipped with 4 LiDAR sensors, something that remains rare even among China's most advanced production vehicles. Most premium cars still use 1, sometimes 2, and a handful go further. 4 means Huawei is taking the idea of environmental perception extremely seriously. And remember, LiDAR isn't there just to make the car look futuristic in photographs. The point is to generate extremely detailed information about the world around the vehicle so the computer can understand objects, distances, and road conditions with a level of precision that ordinary cameras alone may struggle to deliver in certain situations. Huawei is also giving the RX its next generation giant whale battery platform and a full stack redundant architecture designed to support more advanced assisted driving capabilities. And that's the part worth remembering. Redundancy matters because advanced driving systems can't simply assume that one sensor, one computer, or one electrical pathway will never fail. The system needs backup layers. In other words, Huawei isn't just adding more sensors because 4 looks impressive. It is building an architecture designed to keep the vehicle's intelligence functioning when something goes wrong. The RX will also make its public appearance at the 2026 Chengdu Auto Show. But the important event happens first. Orders open on August 20th. So this car is arriving at almost exactly the moment Chinese premium EV buyers are being asked to decide what smart really means. Is a big screen enough? Is assisted parking enough? Or will consumers start expecting their family SUV to have an entire redundant sensor network watching the road? Huawei clearly thinks the answer is the third option. Number 4. BYD Sealion 08. If the Stelato G9 is about intelligent off-road luxury and the Luxeed RX is about sensing, the new BYD Sealion 08 is about taking the flagship SUV and pushing almost every modern feature into one giant package. The Sealion 08 is BYD's new flagship SUV for the Ocean series. It measures more than 5.1 meters long, offers 5- and 6-seat layouts, and comes in both battery electric and plug-in hybrid versions. BYD unveiled the vehicle earlier in the year, but the really important part is happening now. The model opened for pre-orders in August after vehicles had already started arriving at dealerships, and BYD has positioned it as one of the most technologically advanced SUVs in the Ocean lineup. The BEV versions can reach around 900 kilometers CLTC range depending on configuration, while the model can be fitted with very large batteries, dual-motor all-wheel drive, rear-wheel steering, and full-chamber air suspension. And then BYD throws flash charging into the same vehicle. The entire point of the technology is to reduce the biggest practical frustration with a large EV: stopping. Nobody cares how futuristic your SUV looks if you're stuck beside a charger for 40 minutes while the family is waiting. BYD is approaching the problem differently. Its newest charging architecture is designed around extremely high power, and the Sealion 08 joins the company's growing group of vehicles where flash charging is treated as a core feature rather than a luxury option. Then you get inside. This isn't a 5-seat economy EV pretending to be a flagship. The cabin has a wraparound cockpit, a large center display, a ceiling-mounted screen for rear passengers, and extensive ambient lighting. The 6-seat version turns the second row into a proper executive space, rather than simply adding 2 tiny seats to the back, and the vehicle's chassis can adjust its ride height and damping depending on driving conditions. That combination is what makes the Sealion O8 interesting. It is enormous, it is technologically dense, and yet BYD is trying to keep the vehicle within a range where it can actually compete with premium SUVs rather than turning it into a million yuan statement piece. That is the pattern we keep seeing from BYD. Technology gets introduced at the top, the company gains scale, and then the same technology starts moving down into less expensive vehicles. That's how an industry changes, not when one company builds the world's most impressive prototype, but when features that seemed impossible become something a regular buyer expects to find in a showroom. And the Sealion O8 is basically a giant demonstration of that strategy. Number 3. BYD Qin Max. Now we're going to do something that might be even more important than the expensive SUVs. We're going cheap. Really cheap. The BYD Qin Max officially launched in China on August 13th, and the starting price was just 99,900 yuan, or roughly $14,700. Let that number sit for a moment. This is not an old used car, it is a brand new BYD sedan, available as both a pure EV and a plug-in hybrid, and it is positioned above the existing Qin L in BYD's lineup. The Qin Max measures 4.866 meters long, has a 2.82 meter wheelbase, and carries the latest version of BYD's family design. But the headline isn't simply that it is cheap. The headline is what BYD has managed to put underneath that cheap body. The EV version can offer up to 630 kilometers of CLTC range in its higher configuration, and it supports BYD's flash charging system. The company says the high-spec version can go from 10 to 97% in 9 minutes under the required charging conditions. 9 minutes in a sedan that starts at less than $15,000. The plug-in hybrid version gives buyers another option, with electric range that can reach around 230 kilometers CLTC, depending on trim, while keeping a gasoline engine available for longer journeys. The Qin Max also carries BYD's DiPilot 300, the God's Eye assisted driving system, and the vehicle can be equipped with a roof-mounted LiDAR sensor on relevant configurations. Inside, there is a floating central touchscreen, a digital instrument cluster, a two-spoke steering wheel, and wireless phone charging. None of these features alone sounds revolutionary anymore, and that is precisely the point. The revolution is that they are appearing at this price. We need to stop thinking about Chinese automotive competition only in terms of expensive flagship vehicles, because that's actually the wrong place to look. The real threat is at the bottom and middle of the market, where technology can spread to millions of people. If BYD can put rapid charging into a $15,000 class sedan, consumers begin asking why their $30,000 or $40,000 vehicle charges slower. If a budget sedan can have LiDAR and advanced driver assistance, a premium vehicle without it starts looking strangely incomplete. And if a compact sedan can provide hundreds of kilometers of electric range, the argument that EV technology must always cost a fortune becomes harder to defend. The Qin Max is not the sexiest car here. It probably won't get the most attention in an American YouTube thumbnail. But I would argue it might be one of the most important, because the future doesn't become normal when a supercar adopts it. It becomes normal when a car costing $15,000 adopts it. Number 2. Jetour F700. F700, and now we're leaving sensible sedans behind because the Jetour Zongheng F700 seems to have been created by someone who looked at the modern pickup market and decided that 904 horsepower wasn't enough of a joke. This is a massive plug-in hybrid pickup from Chery's Jetour Zongheng line, and it opened pre-sales in July before officially launching in China on August 6th. The pre-sale price started at around 364,900 yuan, roughly $54,000, and the truck itself measures an enormous 5.495 meters long, over 2 meters wide, and nearly 2 meters tall. So yes, it has the physical presence you expect from a serious pickup. But then the powertrain numbers arrive. The Kompeng Super Performance Hybrid system combines a 2.0-liter turbocharged engine, electric motors, and a 2-speed hybrid transmission to produce a claimed 665 kilowatts, or approximately 904 horsepower, with 1,135 newton meters of torque. That's not sports car power. That's ridiculous power, and it comes from a plug-in hybrid pickup with an actual cargo bed. The F700 uses an 800-volt electrical architecture and CATL's 4C Shengxing battery technology, while Jetour claims up to 1,300 kilometers of combined range. The truck also gets 3 differential locks, 15 driving modes, and a full ladder frame structure with independent double wishbone suspension, front and rear. There's even a 6-wheel drive version that has been shown for extreme off-road use. In other words, this isn't a lifestyle pickup with some electric motors added to make the brochure look impressive. It is a serious off-road machine with enough electric torque to make the specification sheet look like a mistake. Inside, Sherry decided that rugged doesn't have to mean basic. There's a 15.6-inch central display, a massive 35.4-inch continuous display, Qualcomm's Snapdragon 8255 computing hardware, and the Zongheng operating system. The truck can also provide 6.6 kilowatts of V2L power, meaning it can act as a mobile generator for equipment, camping, or remote work. And this is exactly why the F700 is so interesting for an older American audience. You can look at it and immediately understand what it's trying to do. Now, it is a big pickup. It has a bed, it has off-road hardware, it has a hybrid powertrain, it can travel long distances. But then the numbers are completely different from what the traditional pickup formula would give you. The electric motors don't exist just to save fuel. They become the performance engine. Battery isn't merely there to make the vehicle qualify as a hybrid. It becomes part of the off-road and power generation system. The computer isn't just running the infotainment. It is tied into a much larger vehicle architecture, and suddenly, the pickup becomes something between a work truck, a performance machine, an off-road toy, and a mobile power station. The F700 is exactly the kind of vehicle that makes you realize Chinese automakers aren't simply copying the American pickup formula anymore. They're taking the parts that work and replacing everything else with their own technology. And now we arrive at number 1. And this one has a story behind the badge that makes it more interesting than another Chinese SUV. Number 1, Freelander 8. The Freelander name should sound familiar to anyone who remembers Land Rover, but this is not a new generation Land Rover Freelander arriving from a British factory. The name has been revived through the joint venture between Chery and Jaguar Land Rover, and the first new vehicle carrying it is the Freelander 8. Pre-sales opened in China on August 14th, starting at around 339,900 yuan, roughly $50,000. There are 5- and 6-seat versions, and the model is being positioned as an extended-range, all-terrain premium SUV. But here's where the story gets completely unexpected. The Freelander 8 comes standard with Huawei Qian ADS5 across the range, an 896-channel LiDAR, Huawei's in-cabin laser vision technology, and a DTOF solid-state rear LiDAR. And then there is the computing hardware. The car is one of the first models using Qualcomm's Snapdragon 8397, with up to 320 TOPS of computing power. For comparison, that's the kind of number that belongs in a discussion about advanced computing platforms, not the kind of vehicle most people would associate with the Freelander badge. But it gets even crazier. The powertrain is a dual-motor all-wheel drive, extended range system, producing 610 kilowatts, or around 818 horsepower, and 813 newton meters of torque. 0 to 100, 4.6 seconds. This is a Freelander, a family SUV carrying a name many people associate with British off-road heritage, is now capable of accelerating like a sports car. The battery is a 60.3 kilowatt-hour CATL pack, giving around 310 kilometers of CLTC electric range, while the 800-volt 6C platform allows a claimed 20 to 80% charge in about 12 minutes. But the off-road hardware is what really finishes the transformation. The Freelander 8 has a 2-speed rear motor with wheel-end torque reaching 8,000 newton meters, standard rear wheel steering up to plus or minus 10 degrees, crab mode, closed dual-chamber air suspension, and an intelligent all-terrain system developed with Huawei. Its suspension can raise ground clearance dramatically for water crossings, and the vehicle can automatically adjust itself according to terrain. Think about what just happened to the Freelander name. Instead of resurrecting it as a simple old-school off-roader, Chery JLR turned it into an 818 horsepower extended-range electric SUV with Huawei's software and LiDAR ecosystem, Qualcomm computing, air suspension, rear steering, and off-road torque that sounds absurd. The brand was revived, but the product philosophy is completely new, and that is why it belongs at number 1. Not because it is necessarily the fastest or cheapest car here, but because it perfectly represents what is happening across China's automotive industry. Old automotive names are being pulled into a new ecosystem where batteries, computing, software, sensors, and electric motors matter just as much as the badge on the hood. And there is another reason I would put the Freelander 8 above the others. The partnership behind it tells us where the industry is heading. Jaguar Land Rover brings decades of experience in vehicle engineering, premium interiors, and off-road credibility. Chery brings manufacturing scale and Chinese automotive development speed. Huawei brings computing, sensors, and intelligent driving systems. KTL brings the battery technology. Qualcomm supplies the chip. And all of that ends up inside one SUV wearing a name that originally came from a completely different automotive era. That is the new Chinese car industry in one vehicle.